What's up guys, Rob the Awesome here, and welcome to part 2 of the explanations to all the balance changes made in the Meet Your Match update. If you haven't seen part 1, I recommend that you do. Click on the annotation on your screen to take you there now. I mean, unless you don't want to understand why the Righteous Bison got changed, then that's fine with me. Alright, you ready? Now, let's explain the changes Valve made to the Demoman, the Heavy, and the Engineer with this update. Let's go! One of the most controversial and overall disgusted nerfs to the Heavy was done to both the Natasha and the Brass Beast. Both of these weapons received a suspicious debuff, only allowing the extra 20% damage resistance when spun up to only take effect when the user is below 50% HP. People are mad. People are triggered. Only 50%? How devastating! What if I told you that this didn't change the guns whatsoever? They are the same guns as before, but with a less than substantial nerf now. The major thing with this resistance was that snipers couldn't one-shot you with a medic fully overhealing you, factoring in the extra spin-up time to equal the damage out. People think that with this new nerf, that when you are fully overhealed, snipers can one-shot you now. But nope, fortunately, you still survived the headshot. The reason for this lackluster nerf is because heavies would win heavy v heavy fights super easily with their medic by having it full time. Not to mention the extra spin up time isn't really that slow for both the Natasha and the Brass Beast. By only having it for when you are below 50% HP, you give the enemy somewhat of a chance in the fight, and overall makes it so that you aren't invincible a majority of the time. Medics are more than likely going to pocket heavies, and when they thought of adding the resistances at first, they didn't factor that bit in. For the sake of competitive matchmaking and heavies making a viable comeback, they had to lower it to when you are at half health for the awesome resistance powers to activate, which in all honesty, isn't that bad. The weapon is fair and balanced on its own, and the nerf wasn't even that big. It's a minor change that keeps heavies at a fair advantage with the rest of the mercs. The Huo-Long Heater, a minigun with very limited use and super ammo drain before, got a huge buff in the Meet Your Match update. It starts off with a tiny nerf of minus 10% damage, but now has an added plus 25% increased damage versus burning players. It even went so far as to reduce the ammo drain from 6 to 4 ammo per second, but decreased the pulse flame damage by 3, which is very minor, to make up for the increased damage versus burning players. This was a long-awaited buff to a minigun without a purpose. It has a neat mechanic that wasted ammo for a fire ring surrounding the Heavy, but it didn't really do its job at stopping spies properly, so in reality it was always a straight downgrade to stock. But by reducing the ammo drain from 6 to 4, it makes the fire ring absolutely reasonable, giving the Heavy on the battlefield longer without having to have him waste time looking for ammo elsewhere. It still doesn't improve the fire ring's overall projection and capability to punish spies, but at least it's a neat little buff that is more reasonable than wasting 6 ammo at a time. The minus 10% damage penalty is fairly small, and it's only to make up for the 25% extra damage to burning players. Though it's a neat concept to be doing more damage to players on fire, you aren't exactly doing the whole 25%. With the minus 10% damage penalty already on there, you are only doing a total of 15% extra damage to burning players, which really isn't a lot. And to be fairly honest, when will a Heavy ever coordinate a play with a Pyro? If a Pyro flames someone up close, it's usually to kill them immediately after, not needing the Heavy to do any damage whatsoever. And if the Pyro flares the enemy from afar, then adding 15% extra damage to fall off damage from long range opponents only adds an extra damage or 2. Nothing special at all. In reality, the extra damage to burning players is pretty useless, making it a neutral whatever stat for a scenario that will probably never happen. Mix it in with 2 negatives of reduced normal and fire ring damage, the only positive is that you get to save 2 ammo per second from the drain from the original build. Yay? To be fair, the Ring of Fire can be fairly useful for objective and sentry gun defense, and minus 10% damage is really nothing at all. It now becomes a neat little side grade to stock with a neat new gimmick to up its potential. This weapon has become a lot more balanced now thanks to this update than its previous straight downgrade state that it was in before. Though it doesn't change as being the worst minigun on my list, it wields even more potential for a small cost, making it worth it to use in more situations than none. Lastly, they fixed the bug that kept the Buffalo Steak Sandwich from being the weapon it was meant to be. They fixed the damage taken multiplier accidentally being plus 10% instead of the listed plus 25%. The fact that it wasn't the initial 25% on the weapon showed that users who used the weapon previously got off easy. I'm glad they can pinpoint this bug and fix it to be fair and balanced all around instead of the heavy taking barely any extra damage for the price of extra melee damage and speed. Though a lot of people may be upset that they supposedly quote-unquote nerfed this weapon, you have to understand that the buffalo steak sandwich was meant to be this way and that everything will be okay. The only real use it ever had, competitively, was for 5 CP rollouts to get you to mid faster. Other than that, this is a weapon that was always meant to be a gimmick weapon that made heavy melee somewhat useful overall in a fun and cool fashion. Nothing more, nothing less. Don't cry over spilt milk. It's not a serious weapon and only useful on rollouts. I'm glad that it's now fixed to be the balanced weapon it always intended to be. The Heavy did get some insane nerfs and some even crazier buffs, but everything reflected throughout these stats ended up being overall balanced to the weapons presented. It may have been an extreme, but everything related to the Heavy ultimately turned out better than expected. But what's even crazier than the Heavy's changes, and in a good way, was what the Demoman got in return. They made a base change to the Alibaba's Wee Booties and the Bootlegger, making it so that all boots now require a shield to activate any move speed bonus listed on the item. This was a very interesting change since everybody on the planet believed that the booties were overall useless and not even close to the potential of the stock grenade launcher. However, it's quite simple when you think about it. The main source of damage for the Demoman is the Sticky Bomb launcher, and a majority of demos use the Sticky Bomb launcher 90% of the time anyway to spout with the competition and get the ground. Thing was, the booties were a little too good. They always were. Adding more health pack health on pickup, more maximum overheal, and more speed for rollouts and overall ground game. That speed made Demoman insanely faster than they needed to be, and giving up a weapon that was barely used for all these benefits was the deal of a lifetime. But why only change the speed benefits instead of everything else? And why give it to the Demo Knight if it was truly amazing? Giving both the Demoman and the Demo Knight the same options led to less people running Demo Knight for the rewards, since Demoman would benefit way more from them, not to mention the fact that Demo Knight's charge acts as a super speed all on its own. If the Bootlegger's health gain got nerfed, then nobody would overall use it to begin with. More health with the addition of extra bonuses makes up for that fact that you don't have a damaging tool for your primary, which isn't a bad trade. They needed a way to effectively make this weapon fair across all variants of Demoman without making too much of a fuss, and the answer to that was the speed affecting some of the weapons that decrease speed as a downside. For example, the Demoman could run the Scotsman's Call Cutter with these booties and it would essentially be a straight upgrade from stock. Just some more added benefits for the Demoman that was a little too good. Now that the speed is only applied to Demo Knights, their speed is able to contest against other Demoman that run the booties, which in all honesty are being ran more because of their insane potential. This small change is fair. Demoman can keep the sick healing benefits while Demo Knights, an already understudy setup, get a slight advantage with the speed to catch up to Demoman, a big damage target pick, and make for easier kills. It's kinda like that Spy's speed boost against Pyros, which I'll get to later. That extra speed may not seem like much, but running straight into a sticky and spike spam was a huge problem that was often too much to handle against an even advantage of extra bootlegger speed. A slight change to a big weapon makes it overall balanced for the gameplay provided, and continues to give good benefits for every variant of Demoman without making huge changes to every other weapon to make up for the bonuses. Never forget the awesomeness of the booties. So many people underrate this weapon, but that just gives those users the surprise advantage over the competition. But enough about the booties. Onward to the Iron Bomber change that decreased the fuse time from 2 seconds to 1.4 seconds. Before I go on about the change, I want to discuss the intentions for both the Iron Bomber and the Quickiebomb launcher when they came out together. With a lot of items for Demoman, there were very limited options for weapon stats and what could be stamped as a new Demoman weapon. Why not create a sticky bomb and a grenade launcher that switches roles? Sounds crazy, right? The Iron Bomber acting like a sticky bomb launcher and the Quickiebomb launcher acting like a grenade launcher? How absurd! However, with these recent changes to both the weapons, and I'll get to the Quickiebomb launcher in a bit, this just overall proves my theory to be true. Many have called the Iron Bomber a side grade to stock, providing less of a role for pipes, less explosion radius, and the same damage as stock. A tiny change, but what's the point? The Iron Bomber's low roll effect, with the new addition of the quicker explosion time, mimics a sticky bomb launcher perfectly. Though it may not provide the damage a sticky bomb can, it can certainly set up traps, spam, and direct damage just the same with a decrease in explosion radius to not completely be a sticky bomb launcher altogether. This also becomes the fake sticky bomb-like launcher for Demo Knights that have to replace the original with a shield. So now you can have your very own 2-bit hack that works all the same. Also, with the faster explosion timer, it also mimics sticky jumping to a T, making it so that you can do jumps with the grenade launcher and serve as you please without wasting any sticky bomb launcher ammunition. The original explosion time threw people off, but with this change that benefits the usage the weapon originally had and makes it so that its intended purpose can shine, we can now overall say that the Iron Bomber is indeed a balanced weapon with a passion to be the sticky bomb launcher it always wanted to be. Now that I've explained how the Iron Bomber mimics a sticky bomb launcher, it's now time to express how the Quickiebomb launcher mimics a grenade launcher with its new and vast list of changes. It got an increased charge time reduction from the original -50%, now becoming -70%, an increased damage bonus for max charge shots from +25% to +35%, and removed the fizzle time of the sticky bombs when they are on the ground. Surprisingly, the only nerf was that its clip size reduced from its original -25% to -50% overall. Even saying those changes out loud makes it super obvious that it's a wannabe grenade launcher. They even went as far as to reduce the clip size to 4 to accommodate that reality. I mean, really? Could they be more obvious? But wait, wasn't the Quickiebomb launcher already a really good weapon? Why did it get so many buffs? The increase in charge time reduction makes it so that you can get the maximum damage fast. With the maximum charge and the added extra 10% damage bonus, it's easier to provide damage output of 100 to 140 damage or more with a single sticky. Not to mention, it detonates pretty fast, easy for direct spam, which is pretty much mimicking that of a grenade launcher in terms of damage. Its damage potential and the fact that charging it up to max takes no time at all makes it so that the reduced clip size makes sense to not get too much damage out there and be a direct upgrade with only 2 stickies gone from the previous build. 4 stickies is reasonable for that extreme amount of damage, and since its main usage is for direct damage, it's doing its job right. The removed fizzle time is only there to provide a message that you can lay traps, but it's mainly used for spam. It gives users the best of both worlds with one style, direct combat, being more effective than the other, traps. The amount of buffs given outweigh the clip size reduction nerf entirely, and finally becomes the grenade launcher it always wanted to be. This is a balanced weapon that caters to the intense and fast style of Demoman, getting the job done in seconds and really being a unique weapon through and through. That took quite a bit of explaining and reasoning to understand the reality behind these weapons, but furthermore, we have yet to talk about the most important change to the Demoman in this update. Something everybody, and I mean everybody, cares about. The sticky jumper. I'm just messing with ya, it just got a model upgrade is all. I don't know if you were there when I explained the rocket jumper in part 1, maybe you were one of the few people that actually skipped past it and missed the crucial Righteous Bison explanation. But if you were, I'll explain it in a nutshell. It's super cartoonish, childish, and plastered with signs so that anybody using it, or faced up against it, know it's a sticky jumper. It was too much like the original stock model that people would continue to use the weapon for damage instead of read what the weapon was all about. Especially with the new skins, people could easily mistake it for a skin and be thrown off altogether. This makes them question why it looks so ridiculous so that people will use it for its intended purpose instead of looking like a fool in front of other people. That's essentially it in a nutshell. It's still balanced for its proper usage and can be altogether useful in the right hands. The Demoman, though simple in the arts of spam, can have a very strategic arsenal at times. There are so many different ways to play this class that it's ridiculous. I'm glad they balanced weapons to finally resemble their true form. But now, it's time to take it up a notch and talk about a class that got the most changes done to himself and his weapons, the Engineer. The Engineer's teleporters now cost 50 metal apiece to make, a base change that differs from the original 125 that you needed to create them. This is a very amazing change. Having it at 125 apiece before was insane. It was understandable since a teleporter saved a crapload of time shipping your team from one end of the map to the other, but the huge amount of metal required was too much to build when you had a sentry nest to supply for. A lot of maps, like Upward for example, are maps that require teleporters for certain points to be a fair hold, and with engineers turning a blind eye to those, it would always be a battle for the last control point left and right. The 50 metal count makes it so that engineers can have a fast rollout, subjectively applying 2 tellies in a dispenser in a short amount of time and have a complete defensive setup. Less metal becomes more appealing to engineers and doesn't waste time setting them up since they are now cheap to begin with. And since they are now a dime a dozen, if it ever gets destroyed, you can easily apply another one no problem instead of hunting for ammo and wasting a good chunk of it on something that will probably just get destroyed again. Teleporters are important, but not important to waste more than half your metal count on. This now becomes a balanced mechanic for engineer that applies 2 teleporters for half the cost, keeping the metal intact and making sure that your sentry nest is the utmost importance. Another important change to the engineer was the futuristic wrench that was awful from the start, the Eureka Effect. They reduced the metal received from dispensers and pickups from 50% to 20%, and added the stat teleporters cost 50% less metal now. The Eureka Effect expected to get some buffs, since it was considered to be one of the worst wrenches in the arsenal. In previous builds, teleporters costed too much, and ammo pickups being 50% less than usual killed any form of keeping a sentry nest alive. Especially with its speed boost decrease for building sentries up fast, there wasn't any point to using this weapon at all. Reducing the ammo loss you get from dispensers and pickups to 20% ensures a fair balance, enough to get things going, but not allowed to just outright get your metal you need. You can at least sustain a decent sentry nest now, while providing useful teleporters at half the cost. It now takes 25 metal apiece to make both entrances, and costs 100 metal to get them to the next level. You can even decide to just place a teleporter down with the Eureka Effect, keeping the effects of having the levels, and then switch wrenches to keep the bonuses of the teleporters, making for a neat cross-wrench strategy in competitive play. I'm not sure if this will stay for long, but it has been some time since the update has come out, so I think it's here to stay. Luckily, being able to get your teleporters up in one foul swoop makes things a little easier for rollouts, especially since you can't get all your ammo from pickups or dispensers to begin with, creating an equal balance for engineer rollouts. Not to mention, with the 25 metal teleporters, there is more opportunity for free ninja-neering strategies and creating easy setups behind the enemy that can make or break the game. There's a lot to be had with these changes, and everything balances out to make this an interesting wrench among the rest. The negatives no longer outweigh the positives, and its unique ability can flourish while all in all maintaining proper engineer strategies. This weapon is balanced on all accounts and could definitely be a meta changer in the right hands. There were certainly a lot of well-needed buffs to some of Engineer's valuable assets, but now it's time to delve into the weird changes that have gotten people asking questions to whether or not Valve truly tests their weapons or not. To start, we have the Widowmaker, which got an interesting stat buff that increases your damage by 10% with the weapon when attacking the same target as your sentry. Now, this isn't really a buff or a nerf. 10% isn't really even much of a damage boost to begin with, and something that often doesn't make sense to add whatsoever, until you realize that it's not meant to be a change. Like many of the other changes, this was meant to convey a message to people on how to use the weapon properly. This isn't a weapon you should be using with your level 3 sentry gun. You need to resource the ammo in keeping that sentry nest alive, so it's not so much a defensive weapon, but rather an offensive weapon. The only sentry that you could use this stat properly with is the mini sentry. The Widowmaker is an aggressive engineer's weapon. Place the mini down and then go ham. If your sentry happens to hit the target you're shooting, then you get extra damage. Simple as that. Valve just wants to tell you guys that you should be using it the way it was meant to be used, with a mini or in an aggressive flank engineer strategy. Simple as that. The weapon still is balanced, but this added stat was to convey an indirect message to any and all engineer mains on what they should be doing to effectively use the Widowmaker. Valve's been adding a lot of indirect messages as of lately. Valve really knows what they are doing with their weapons, and they only want to help us explore the endless possibilities with their creations. Another cool little change is what they did to the short circuit, which made the base projectile attack to be minus 10 metal every use, but it reduces the metal by 5 for every projectile destroyed with that attack. It originally required 15 metal to use your alt attack, which was a lot to destroy a crap load of spam and wasted too much ammo for it to be used too often. Now it's been reduced to minus 10 per attack, and you have a shot at reducing it if you actually use it for its intended purpose. It makes it very useful and worthwhile to destroy projectiles, not wasting any real metal for doing what it was meant to do. The short circuit was always meant to destroy projectiles, and now it's definitely worth it as a secondary for the arsenal. However, as good as the buff may be, it still doesn't beat out any of the engineer secondaries that provide a little bit more usage. Since the weapon's main function has been changed for the better, and it now has a proper use without wasting too much metal, this weapon has been balanced out to be a projectile class's worst enemy. Well, besides the Pyro's Air Blast, of course. There are so many great engineer changes. Very awesome to see that they are doing great work with the weapons they did change. But we have one last weapon we need to cover. The one weapon that people despise more than any other weapon, and that is the Pomson. This baby had an exploit with shooting through your own engineer buildings, and they fixed it. It increased close range damage by 10 and reduced long range damage by 10 as well, and overall updating the projectile impact sound to be unique to other weapons. People were tilted when they saw that the Pomson didn't get a bigger change. It's an annoying weapon that deserves the biggest of nerfs. However, that isn't true at all. The Pomson, as cool as it is, really isn't that great of a gun. Sure, it drains Ubercharge from enemy medics by 10% per hit, and it gets rid of enemy spies' cloak like crazy, but other than that, what does it provide? The damage was never that good. It was always used long range, and it was ultimately spammy. In the long run, how many Pomson shots do engineers actually hit? Not that many when you really think about it. Like I said, engineers would really only use it at long range, so to reduce that spam, they nerfed the damage by 10 and accommodated a more aggressive style of play by upping the point blank damage by 10 as well. The damage is now widespread, giving less room for huge damage at long distances, so it balances out that damage spread while keeping the mechanics it once had. There's no need to change any of the drain mechanics, due to the projectiles being pretty easy to dodge, Uber charge is super easy to get back, and 10% isn't that much at all. And if you are a spy, you have the l'étranger to get cloak back, or you can be a better spy by not getting in the laser's range. All it needed was a spam filter, and that's what they applied. Now it's become a better weapon for everyone and an overall balanced weapon in the long run. It still doesn't do huge damage, but at least the spam allure it once had is gone, which is all that matters. That's it for part 2. We've only got one more part to go. The annotation on the screen will take you there right now. Can you believe that all 3 parts are uploaded right now? That's insane. What are you still doing here? Well, while you're still here at least, leave a like and subscribe for the huge amount of effort put into making these videos for you guys. It means a lot and it shows that you want more of these types of videos on the channel. Remember to be awesome, stay awesome, and to have an awesome day. I'm Rob the Awesome, and I'll see you in part 3. Ciao for now!